She was only 10 years old, her hands smeared with engine grease, working on a car that didn't belong in her world. A millionaire's Mustang roared back to life under her small but skilled touch. But as the man reached to thank her, his eyes froze, not on her face, but on the gleam of a rare emerald ring wrapped around her tiny finger. A ring he thought was lost forever, and one tied to a dark chapter most people would rather bury. Who was this little girl, and how did she end up wearing the one thing that could destroy a powerful man's legacy? Layla Johnson's life was simple, though far from easy. At 10 years old, she lived with her adoptive mother, Diana, in a modest home on the edge of town. Most kids her age spent afternoons playing games, but Layla preferred the quiet hum of an engine and the smell of motor oil. She had a gift, hands that could coax life back into machines others had given up on. Her talent wasn't taught in a classroom. It came from long hours in Diana's small garage, a place filled with second-hand tools and the faint sound of jazz on an old radio. For Layla, fixing engines wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to feel in control in a world that hadn't always been kind to her. What the neighbors saw was a bright, determined little girl. What they didn't see was the shadow in her past. A childhood cut short in an orphanage that closed under mysterious circumstances, and a piece of that past now resting quietly on her finger. A small emerald ring. That Saturday afternoon began like any other, but in a matter of minutes, a chance encounter with a wealthy stranger would set off a chain of events neither of them could have imagined. The day had been quiet until the sound of a deep engine broke through the hum of the neighborhood. A cherry-red Mustang rolled slowly into Diana's driveway, the paint glinting under the sun. Behind the wheel sat Andrew Whitaker, a man whose tailored suit and polished shoes didn't belong anywhere near a grease-stained garage. Andrew's Mustang had stalled a mile from the highway. A neighbor had pointed him toward the woman who could fix anything. But when he stepped out of his car, he was met not by a woman, but by a 10-year-old girl with dark skin, oil-streaked cheeks, and eyes that didn't flinch when she saw the millionaire standing over her. Layla didn't hesitate. She slid under the hood, her hands moving with quiet precision, ignoring the way Andrew's brows knit together as if questioning whether she was even capable of turning a wrench. 10 minutes later, the Mustang coughed, then roared back to life. That's when Andrew's gaze caught something else. A flash of green on her hand. The emerald ring. His chest tightened. He knew that ring. It was a one-of-a-kind heirloom from decades ago, and it had vanished under circumstances his family never spoke about. But before he could ask, Diana emerged from the garage, her voice sharp and protective. That night, Andrew couldn't let it go. He dug into old family records, and the more he searched, the more disturbing the truth became. The ring had once belonged to his uncle, Howard Whitaker, a man whose charitable orphanage for gifted children had shut down abruptly after whispers of exploitation and abuse surfaced. None of it had ever made the papers. The victims were silenced. Days later, Andrew returned, this time with questions. Diana's guarded answers led him to a chilling discovery. Layla had lived in that very orphanage. She wasn't just a child with a rare talent. She was a survivor of something the Whitaker family had buried for years. But uncovering the past wasn't without risk. Andrew noticed unfamiliar cars parked near Diana's home. Strange men watching from across the street. The same name kept surfacing in hushed conversations, Howard Whitaker. Layla's life, already marked by the shadows of her past, was about to be pulled back into a world she had barely escaped. And Andrew was starting to realize that if they kept digging, they might not walk away unscathed. Because some families will do anything to keep their secrets, even if it means destroying a little girl all over again. The night of the broadcast was supposed to be controlled, carefully planned between Andrew, Diana, a trusted journalist, and the prosecutor willing to reopen the case. But the moment the cameras went live, the past exploded into the present. On screen, the journalist began reading testimonies from former orphanage residents. Their words painted a chilling picture. Children isolated, their talents exploited, their identities erased. Then came Layla's turn. Her voice was steady, but her small hands trembled as she described the locked rooms, the long hours, and the men in suits who treated her like property instead of a child. In the control room, Andrew spotted movement on the security feed. Black SUVs pulling up outside. Men in dark coats stepping out. Faces hard, eyes locked on the building. Howard Whitaker wasn't going to let this story air. The power flickered. The producer shouted to keep rolling. The journalist leaned closer to the mic, revealing the name no one had dared speak for years. Howard Whitaker. Gasps filled the studio. And then, the final blow. Andrew pulled the emerald ring from his pocket, holding it up for the camera. "This," he said, "was proof my family's fortune was built on stolen lives." The sound of pounding at the studio doors echoed like gunshots. The lights blazed hotter, the air thick with adrenaline. Somewhere in the chaos, Layla's gaze found the camera. She didn't look afraid. She looked unshakable. "Now the world knows," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the noise. But outside, the men were already breaking in. This was no longer just a broadcast. It was a fight to make sure the truth survived the night. And survival was far from guaranteed. The pounding on the studio doors didn't stop the broadcast. Police arrived minutes later. Minutes that felt like hours, and the feed continued uninterrupted. By the time the men outside were forced to leave, the damage to Howard Whitaker's legacy was already irreversible. His name trended across every platform, tied not to philanthropy but to exploitation, cruelty, and the silenced voices of children like Layla. In the weeks that followed, lawsuits multiplied. The state reopened investigations. Howard faced charges, but more importantly, survivors came forward, finally unafraid. Layla's testimony, once just a whisper in a small garage, became a rallying cry. 5 years later, where the orphanage once stood, a new sign rose into the sky: the Johnson Center for Young Inventors. It wasn't built with stolen money or false charity. It was built with community donations, driven by a promise that no child's talent would ever be used as a weapon against them. Layla walked those halls not as a victim, but as a mentor. She still wore the emerald ring, not as a reminder of the man who tried to erase her, but of the truth she had survived to tell. This story is not just about a girl, a car, and a ring. It's about a system that fails the vulnerable, and the rare courage it takes to fight back. The question is, how many more Laylas are still out there, unseen, unheard, carrying the weight of someone else's secrets? And when they speak, will we be ready to listen? Did Layla's story touch your heart? If so, please like this video to show you care, and share it with others so more people can hear her story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that make a difference.